jumped at the chance. I can't imagine a more important topic, a more important conversation that we need to be having, and I'm grateful to be able to be here to learn from this event and to have been a small part of bringing Katie here today. At the Humanities Institute, as in so many of our departments, we spend a lot of time thinking about the relationship between language, image, power, and meaning. How stories shape what we believe, and how what we believe shapes what we do, and also what we see and what we believe. We're living in a moment when the very idea of a shared set of facts, that we're all seeing the same thing, which is, of course, one of the foundations that democratic debate depends on, is under extraordinary pressure. Among other pressures, AI-generated content can now produce convincing misinformation at a speed and scale we've never seen before. And for me, and I know for so many of my colleagues, this is a moment that pushes us, that demands that we remember the skills that we learn here at UConn, we learn in journalism and political science and other humanities classes, the habits of mind, the patience, the critical thinking, the close reading, and a civic commitment to sort what's true, what really feels true, or maybe what we wish were true. That's why the work PolitiFact does matter so much, and why I'm so honored to be one of the people welcoming Katie Sanders here today. PolitiFact, if you don't know, you will learn more, but it has been doing the painstaking, often thankless work of holding public claims up to the light and giving all of us a common reference point for accountability. I'm also delighted to learn from Amanda Jane Crawford, who will be sort of guiding the conversation. Her journalistic expertise and a commitment to an informed public makes her the perfect person to help us learn from Katie. And now I'm going to get out of the way and bring up Kate Parrish, who's done so much to make this happen. Have fun and don't be fooled.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Parrish, an assistant professor of residence here in the UConn Journalism Department and president of the Connecticut Foundation for Open Government, or CFOG, we like to call it. I'm pleased to introduce our guest speaker today. Katie Sanders is editor-in-chief of PolitiFact, a nonprofit fact-checking newsroom that is part of the Poynter Institute for Media Studies in Florida. PolitiFact is known for its Truthometer that evaluates the truthfulness of claims made by politicians and circulating on social media. In 2009, this was amazing news, PolitiFact became the first website to win a Pulitzer Prize when it was recognized in the national reporting category for its in-depth coverage then of the 2008 presidential campaign. As part of her role, Katie oversees PolitiFact's partnerships with local and national newsrooms and regularly teaches fact checks techniques to journalists, social media influencers, and students from around the world. She's a past president of the Florida Society of Newspaper Editors and previously worked at the Tampa Bay Times. So we'll welcome Katie in just a second. After a short presentation from Katie, she will be joined in conversation by CFOG board member and associate professor of journalism Amanda J. Crawford. Professor Crawford is a former political reporter for Bloomberg News and other publications who joined our faculty in the journalism department in 2018. Her research focuses on media coverage of mass shootings, misinformation and conspiracy theories, and the role of journalists in our democracy. Her first book on these topics will be published next year by Columbia University Press. So now please welcome Katie.
Hi everyone, it is so good to be here. I'm very grateful for everybody who brought me up to tell you about some tips so that you don't feel fooled online. Here's the presentation. presentation just for today. How to lie to friends and let politicians off easy. You got your notebooks out? Okay, that was the requisite April Fool's joke. That's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to do the opposite. We are going to teach you how to protect yourself, the people you love, and from falling for false information online. And I think also, maybe during the discussion we could talk about tactful ways to correct people. that advice is always changing. I've been doing fact-checking journalism. Hopefully you're all good at fact-checking journalism. But I've been with PolitiFact officially since 2012. Before that, I was at the Bay Times. And I have to say, I'm a lifelong Floridian. I'm a Florida Gator grad, so I'm kind of in a sour mood this week, like the opposite of whatever you're feeling. I feel like I should have had that, but I'm happy for you. I wish you the best. And as Kate mentioned, I love the part of my job that requires me to go out into towns around the country, sometimes around the world, and offer tips on how we do it, kind of revealing our trade secrets. Because you can do it, and journalists should be doing this, even if you don't work for PolitiFact. The Pants on Fire election. This is actually a very old slide. This is from 2016, and that was the year that I first came to Connecticut, and it's also the first time I met Amanda at Western Kentucky University. And so this is a picture that someone took of that presentation, which was called the Pants on Fire election. So it was called at the time, I was new editor, and I deemed 2016 the worst year for truth ever. And going down memory lane has just been so funny because of that. I didn't know it could get worse. Didn't know the bottom could drop out even more. What happened over the next 10 years. We had COVID-19 spreading a bunch of conspiracy theories and that endangered public health. We had the former president, now current president, insisting he won the 2020 election, which he did not, which is something that is still a running through line in our politics today. There was a war launched in Ukraine based on lies about Ukraine. And last year was 2025. In 2024, we named the rumor that was repeated at a presidential debate that Haitian migrants in Ohio, Springfield, Ohio, were stealing pets and eating them our lie of the year. Last year was not better. There were so many lies. We actually run this annual exercise at PolitiFact called the Lie of the Year. So several of the things I just ticked off in the previous slide were things that we examined at the end of the year as the most significant, impactful political lies of those years. Last year, we ripped up our usual script. We were seeing lies about tariffs, about public health, about immigration. The administration was saying we are prioritizing criminals for deportation. It was very hard to single out one talking point as more impactful, more significant. And not just from the administration, by the way, but we had this onslaught of AI video that was clouding the information ecosystem even more. So we threw out our usual script and just deemed 2025 the year of the lies and a series of essays explaining why lies matter. And lies matter, and calling out lies matters because lies hurt people. Lies have consequences. And so I hope that you leave this conversation feeling more empowered, not to ignore lies, not to tune them out. I understand how that's a defense mechanism so that we no longer feel, sometimes feeling numb to lies is a defense mechanism. But it's very important to stay vigilant and hold on to truth. There's too much lying in our politics. AI slop is distressing. It's blurring all the lines between what's real and what's fake, and it's just getting so good. It's very hard to tell what's real and what's not. Does anybody agree with that? Just a vibe check. Okay, good. This is not a bad news presentation. I have some good news for you. Number one, fact checkers are still here, and that is not something you should take for granted. Journalism jobs are difficult. As I'm sure you've heard, fact checkers have been under attack, but PolitiFact is still going. We have other colleagues in the field, groups like factcheck.org, Lead Stories, what's real and what's not. That's actually a bad strategy because there's too much that is wrong online, in your social media feeds, and from politicians these days, right? You need to know how to do it yourself, especially if you're a journalist or a journalist in the making. You need to know how to identify that for your readers on any beat that you have, not just politics. So I'm going to show you how to do it. Kate was very kind to mention that PolitiFact won the Pulitzer Prize in 2009. We were started as this newspaper project. It was supposed to be an experiment to cover the 2008 election. And the St. Petersburg Times and the Tampa Bay Times, a group of editors just had an idea. I wasn't there yet, so I'm not taking credit. But a group of editors just had the idea, what if we cover this election differently? What if instead of repeating what he said and she said, we actually just tell voters who got it right and who was wrong, so that people know who's lying to them and they can use that information to make whatever decisions they want. So they came up with this rating system that we call the Truth-O-Meter. They introduced 6 ratings from true, half true, all the way down to pants on fire, our crowd favorite, for the most ridiculous lies. And it was a very successful project, and it quickly became its own growing thing. In 2018, something really important happened. We were acquired by the Poynter Institute. It's a complicated family, but Poynter actually owns the newspaper, which is for profit. But Poynter, which trains journalists in the US and around the world, is a nonprofit. And so by joining Poynter, we were able to grow and really become the nonprofit newsroom that I think we really needed to be. So we've been there since 2018, and we have a staff of 20. And depending on who I'm talking to, they're either like, that's it, or whoa, that's a lot. And most days I kind of feel like a combination of the two. Like we're fortunate. We have a lot of reporters who can chase the most important narratives of the day. And there's too many narratives. We can't get to them all. So I feel it as the editor-in-chief, like, I want more, and that would be difficult. So if you are familiar with our website, PolitiFact.com, you'll notice there's kind of a medley of different content types. We fact-checked the president. We fact-checked President Trump many, many times. He's our most fact-checked politician by far. That's just his nature. That's the way he says. He says a lot of things. A lot of them are wrong. We've been covering him since 2015, actually since before then. But you'll also find coverage of debates in Congress. We've been doing a lot of fact-checking of Democrats who are critical of the Save America Act. You can find that on our homepage now. And we're getting really excited to cover midterm races, particularly toss-up Senate races. We only have a few people, as I mentioned, so can't cover them all, but I can talk to you about why we're prioritizing the races that we are. Following the Pants on Fire election, part 1, 2016, we really stepped up our coverage of online mis and disinformation. So that's what I'm going to focus the rest of this presentation on, but you can still find that on our website. We used to do this robustly, 5 to 10 stories per day, because we had a partnership with Meta to identify false claims and conspiracy theories on its platforms and provide more information to users about that claim you saw is wrong, here's why. Meta ended that relationship with fact checkers last year. We're still covering this information. We're not covering it the way we did, but we're still calling out online hoaxes, but we're also starting a new approach on fact-checking claims around personal health, kind of a fact-forward product that we're launching later this spring. But if you go to our website now, you can see we've been soft launching this content. It's bringing you truthful information about health claims you've seen, about detoxes, the vitamin K shot for babies. Those are just things in the last week, so they're top of mind. But they are the source of a lot of confusion on social media. And we want to test whether providing information about those things outside of a political fact check will make people more receptive to sharing and taking in the information. So this is kind of our main focus now. This is our bread and butter fact-checking. Fact-checking claims by politicians or about them. Donald Trump is talking a lot about mail-in voting. We just signed an order related to mail-in voting last night. He says that's mail-in voting low rate of mail-in ballot fraud. President Trump likes to use it himself, so that got a pants on fire rating. But I wanted to show that we fact-checked Senator Chris Murphy recently, who was talking about responding very quickly to the invasion in Iran, which is invasion wasn't the word, but that's been another major point of our coverage for the last month. Weirdly enough, this story at the bottom about Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu not having 6 fingers and also not being dead has been our most popular fact check of the past month. So there is still clearly a lot of confusion, a lot of conspiracy theory go around, and a lot of interest in knowing what the heck is going on with that clip. PolitiFact is a very special brand of journalism, and I want to share with you our guiding principles. So this image is something that you'll see at the bottom of every story, which is a list of every source that we consulted, read, or spoke with to come up with our conclusions. We've felt that being transparent about how we know our information, giving readers the tools to recreate their conclusions for themselves, it builds trust. And so the list of sources appears at the bottom of our story, but at the top of our story, we say to readers, see our sources. This is how we know the article that you're about to see. This is how we came to our conclusion. So that's been something important from day one. Nonpartisanship, also a non-negotiable if you're going to work for PolitiFact. We are working in very, very hot partisan times, and so it's very important for us to make sure we're applying equal scrutiny to both sides of the political aisle. We have a, not so fun page on our website, but you can find it. You can find a list of every correction we've made publicly. We think that's important to not just make on individual stories at the bottom of the story, as many news sources do, but we tag them on their own page so that readers can see what we do when we get it wrong. No journalist is perfect. This is what our truthometer looks like. And there are some things that we do every time we issue a truthometer rating that I think give them a lot of gut checking and build in a lot of consistency. So we don't just willy-nilly throw out truthometer ratings at the end of a story. A reporter doesn't just say, true, or pants on fire. Editors, usually a team of 3, will read a story, have a conversation, usually on Zoom, and debate whether or not this proposed rating is accurate. Each of these ratings has a concise definition that we apply to every fact check that we write about. So when we're coming up with these ratings, we have learned over the years we need to be asking the same set of questions before we hit publish in the interest of fairness, nonpartisanship, consistency, all of that. So we have 3 editors. I don't want to say tear it apart. Grill the reporter. Grill the work before it goes live for any word choices that may have a connotation that some people will find biased. That might not be the intention, but that might help people find it, so we want to identify that before we hit publish. We have editors reviewing the copy with a skeptical eye. Did multiple experts really say this? I only see one expert. Did multiple experts from across the political spectrum say that? I only see 2 from the right. Editors should always be asking those kind of questions, but we triple it up to make sure that we are giving this story the best shot we can before it goes into the world. So we call those conversations chambers, which you don't need to remember from this conversation, but I couldn't not tell you. We also think it's important that we let the people we fact check know that we're fact checking them every single time. And so we have, as part of our conversation, did we call this person? Did we call their spokesperson? Did we email them? Did we try and try and try? A lot of times, we know what they're referencing. We pay close attention to talking points on the news. We're like, oh, they're referencing that study. Oh, we've already written about this. They're getting that study wrong. We kind of know. But we can't assume we know everything. That's where we get into the danger zone. So even if we think we have it all figured out, we need to try to reach that source so that they can tell us why they made that comment. So this is our gut check to make sure we've given every effort to get comment from that person, to let them know what we're doing, provide evidence. And I mentioned consistency. PolitiFact, since it was started in 2007, has produced over 30,000 fact checks. And we actually have several people on our team who've been around longer than I've been on PolitiFact, since 2009. For years, we would ask, how have we rated statements like this before, about the unemployment rate or labor force participation rate or all these wonky things. And we had some human libraries. We'd be like, there's a chief correspondent named Lou. We'd say, Lou, have we rated statements like this true or mostly true? We'd rely on Lou's memory, and he'd be like, yeah, I think so. We have a few people on our team who have really good recall. But we've actually started using an AI assistant to query our archive and not only provide a pretty rapid analysis of how we've rated similar statements, but it also suggests how the AI would rate it, which is not something we're relying on, important to know, but is very interesting because you're asking the machine to read it at a purely logical level and recommend a rating. And most of the time, it agrees with our reporter's recommendation, but sometimes it doesn't. It really makes us stop and think, does ours make sense? Why doesn't the machine say it? So that's been very interesting. I'm very excited about this year. I'm ready to talk about the midterms. I feel like you might be a group that is ready to talk about the midterms. We are, I'll save it for our conversation if you like, but we are internally dividing up the races that people are going to cover, and it's very exciting. So I'm excited to see how those shake out. We also have our health project coming, and as part of my editor-in-chief job, I'm also thinking about how we can keep fact-checking sustainable. It's not as easy to get grants from nonprofits. It's not as easy to, I'll just leave it at that, actually. But we are coming up with creative ways to fund our journalism, and that is good news. So I'm going to end the presentation with a few examples and kind of deconstructing how we figured it out so that you can figure out similar things. So, I'm not sure how big this is, but this is what appears to be a post by Donald Trump on Truth Social about Tiger Woods. Donald Trump is a big fan of golf. He's very close to Tiger, and Tiger got into some legal trouble last week in a car accident. And this screenshot was going around, especially on Threads. I actually might have gotten alert about it. And it's being passed around as if it's real. People could not believe that Donald Trump had heard news about Tiger Woods and appealed to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis to immediately and completely pardon Tiger so he can go focus on Masters. Does this sound like something President Trump might do? I'm not saying. But he likes to use all caps. He likes to tweet about unconventional things, perhaps. But this is not real. The important thing I'm going to say about this is that this was going around on social media platforms, but it's very hit or miss whether it got a community note, which has become the popular way to combat online misinformation by the platforms. Sometimes things get tagged with community note, but a lot of times that system is just not up to speed, up to scale. So there are plenty of examples we found across many social platforms that had no indication that this was not true. But we were able to figure it out really quickly. One, go to the source. Was this on Trump's True Social feed? No, it was not. He could have deleted it though, so let's keep going. You have to get off of the platform you're on. So get off the threads, step away from the threads, open Chrome, open a browser, and Google Trump, pardon, Tiger Woods, DeSantis, keywords. Is there anything that corroborates that he said this, even if he did delete it? Nothing reputable online. We also did a reverse image search. Are you all up on reverse image searches? So what we noticed is that, yes, this tweet was everywhere. This post was everywhere. But the number of retweets and likes, you can see in very small print, 565 retweets, it was the same in every single timestamp of the reverse image search. So if it were going bad news category of my presentation, it is getting really, really, really hard, if not impossible, to identify with the naked eye AI content, and that has been a rapid development. I could not have said that 2 years ago, maybe even a year ago. You know, you'd still have people who'd be like six fingers on the hand, or you know, third eye or something. But that's not happening here. So if you're seeing this kind of content on reels or shorts, like how do you figure out this is designed to make me feel something, but I feel manipulated and I don't know why. This is how we figured it out. We were able to run the video through a number of AI detection tools, which can be helpful. They're not perfect, they're getting better. And it came up with a really high confidence level that this was a fake video. So that at least is a signal that this probably isn't legit. We also, as we're reporters, talked to an expert. And the expert pointed out something interesting, which is that that clip is 10 seconds, and video clips that are 10 to 15 seconds are a sign. That's where a lot of these videos max out. So that is kind of another sign. It's not definitive proof that this isn't real, but it's adding to the case that it isn't real, right? We didn't stop there. These are subtle, but there are some anomalies. Again, the expert pointed out. The child's hand was disappearing into the flag, into the casket in a natural way. And you have to really stare at it, I think, but there was still something there. This is what I did first when I was even vetting this as an idea for our team. I went to see, again, what is the source of this information, who is sharing it. And there were many Facebook pages sharing it, but the one I found was called Critter PD. And if you go to its about, just like its description on its Facebook page, it says it posts fictional content for a real cause. What is the cause? I don't know. You decide. Make you feel sad, make you feel angry, make you feel anything. What does that mean? Sorry, that didn't build on where I was going. It's designed to manipulate you. And if you are sharing this kind of content, feeling something, and you're sharing it, that is generating more revenue for the people who create these videos. And I think once you tell people why these things are circulating, I think that helps them become more skeptical of it. We also did Google searches. We checked news reports and found that none of the people who were in that first wave of U.S. service members killed in retaliatory attacks had authors. So just on the facts, that story wasn't adding up. Okay, I'm closing now. These are our golden rules that I want you to remember, and you've heard me say them as we've uncovered these examples. If you're seeing something online you're not sure, here's where you start. You ask who is behind this, who is sharing it. You ask what is their evidence, what are they citing, what are they going off of? Do they have real support? But you don't get stuck in that rabbit hole. You have to open that other tab, get off of that source, don't read the whole thing. Open another tab and see what other sources have to say. This is really basic, but it works it can work for your relatives, your friends, folks who are in middle school and high school, your siblings, certainly yourselves. So please write that down, and I'm looking forward to the discussion with Amanda. 2 more shout outs. We just had a documentary produced about PolitiFact by Japanese documentarians. And there's an English version. So if you're curious about our day-to-day fact-checking of the Trump administration or AI, several of our reporters are featured here, and it's so good. It's 50 minutes, but I'm just like amazed at what they produced. So it's getting our message out to the world, which is great. It's an independent documentary, but I like it. Please, if you're not following us on social media, we do a lot of video debunks of viral content. You can see our reporters and how they are translating what they do for our website to online. We're everywhere. And also, if you sign up for the weekly email, not only will you hear from me tomorrow, but it'll make me very happy. All right, thank you all.
Hi everyone. Thank you for hanging in with us and for listening to Katie's presentation. Thank you so much for giving us such great tips. So we're going to dig in a little bit. I'm going to lead the conversation first and ask some questions that are on my mind from listening. But I won't take too long, and soon we'll turn the questions over to you. We'll have a student from the Society of Professional Journalists going to go around with a microphone to take your questions. So just hang tight for a few minutes and then we'll turn it over to you as well. And I apologize, I took a lot of notes, so I'm gonna cheat and use these notes to ask questions while I talk to Katie.
Never apologize for notes. I'm surprised I don't do book. I love taking notes.
So, when PolitiFact started, 2008, right? Was it, sorry, what year?
Technically 07. It was supposed to
07.
cover the Florida presidential primary. So.
And then you joined even 4 years later. How has the world changed as far as facts, truth, the spread of disinformation? I mean, obviously we talked about AI, but when you started it out, it was because of concerns about truthfulness in the political discourse. And I feel like we're a world away now. And so I'm wondering from your perspective, like, how did that mission evolve in importance, and what we've seen over that time?
I think our evolution is important, and we had to evolve to keep up with the way people are learning their facts about politics and news. But when I started, it was like 2011, 2012, and I was fact-checking Florida politicians specifically. So several times a week, listening to legislative debates, during election years, listening to actual debates, TV ads, and it was pretty squarely limited to what politicians said and was it true or not. Sometimes we'd hear a funny fact on a show like Glee, I feel like I'm really dating myself now, about the rise of Spanish in schools or dolphins. We would do something out of the ordinary on occasion, but it was 95% politicians, and we had plenty of material. I mean, the Affordable Care Act generated years and years and years of debate and outlandish falsehoods. It wasn't as if misinformation wasn't happening. There was the birtherism movement. There were chain emails, which are basically Facebook chains now. And so we would do chain emails about Islam. There were always very long things on very passionate topics. But it really wasn't until that Pants on Fire election, I think, that we started carving out a whole section of our team. I mean, at one point, more people on our team covered online misinformation than politicians. And so that's a huge, huge flip. They did it in a dedicated way. And I think it was necessary because it's just out of control. And so I think in order to be an entity like ours, you have to do it. There's no point in closing your ear to one source of misinformation. The lines are just so blurred, from TV influencers to the White House, people seeking office online. It all works together to really be our imperiled information system, ecosystem.
When PolitiFact started out, was it the pressure of the internet that was really getting us to the world where we needed fact checkers? Was it a change in journalism? I was talking to my students and I was telling them that, I think for most of them that they weren't as engaged with politics as you and I were, pre-internet or pre-social media, right? Many of you were not alive, pre-internet at least. So, I mean, was it that pressure that you think took us to this space where something like PolitiFact was needed? Or changing values, decline in constant facts from shared media, or?
I really think it was one Washington bureau chief who was getting ready to cover another election where he was going to hear the same old BS said by, a multitude of candidates. He was covering political conventions, and he killed Dare, and he was like, I just can't do it. He was covering, I think, the 2004 convention and was hearing, it's a famous speech and story, but he was just hearing these attacks, and he was like, this isn't true. I know it's not true, but people are going to write about this because he's yelling the loudest, and he is, making salacious claims, and it just wasn't the So PolitiFact wasn't the first fact-checking outlet. Factcheck.org was first in, I think, 2003. You're gonna have to fact check me on that. But they were first, so it wasn't something that hadn't been done, but what PolitiFact did was bring more of a consumer reports kind of feel to it. And so what's interesting is like, I really admire the bravery of and buy-in of the whole newsroom, because there weren't a lot of standalone internet projects at that time, if you can believe it. And this was a regional newspaper. That was a really respected writer's paper. And so it wasn't the kind of place where, you know, they're launching these like fabulous products, you know, but they launched this product and it wasn't, the stories then were very different. They would be like 3 paragraphs sometimes. They made a claim that George W. Bush was brain dead by Joe Biden, hands on fire. And I just looked back at that story, it's very short. They meant it very, as a literal fact check, that's what Joe Biden said. But I was like, I don't know if I would approve that assignment, you know, because it's just like, it feels more rhetorical. But they were experimenting, and they were creating a new format. And as somebody in the driver's seat now, that's very hard to do. So I admire the chutzpah they had. And I do think that the readership reception to it was how they knew they'd struggled.
And we certainly saw a proliferation of fact-checking organizations in the United States, around the world, international fact-checking organizations. Did we hit a peak and are we in a decline on that? Because, you know, you mentioned Meta pulling out of the partnership with PolitiFact. So I'm wondering if you can tell us, like, the, you know, climate for fact-checkers right now, because it did seem like, you know, there was a moment we thought all the platforms are going to fact check.
Yeah.
And now none of the platforms are really fact checking.
Last year was a pretty bad year on multiple fronts, not just the Meta decision. But I should back up and say there are like 170 outlets that do what PolitiFact does around the world, and we're really inspired to bring what PolitiFact does to their country. You can go to the International Fact Checking Network, which is another pointer project, and map out exactly where that fact checking is happening, but it's happening in more countries than you would think. There's even fact checking of the regime of Iran from an exile in Canada. And so that shows you, like, this is really good stuff. Tomorrow, by the way, April 2nd, is International Fact Checking Day. So if you're curious about this, tomorrow would be a really great time to go to Pointer's website and see, I think, 5 columns, including one from PolitiFact, about the work of fact checkers and where we are right now. And so I'm not trying to hide the bad news. We probably have peaked in 2024. I just think candidly, that was a 2025 with the loss of appetite among social media platforms broadly to fact check content on their platforms. That's big. But Meta still has agreements around the world. And I should be candid and say that the agreements with Meta have really supported a lot of the fact checking, not just of social media content, but of politicians in those countries around the world. So the Meta program that started after the 2016 election, because of the rampant abundance of fake news on the platform, is still in effect for most of the world, just not the US. Wow. And on top of that, a lot of these organizations were receiving grants from USAID or the State Department to promote democracy or promote media literacy in those countries, you know, democratic ideals, because they were working in autocratic, working under those conditions. And so they also lost that funding. So outlets like ours in Africa or Eastern Europe, the Baltics. So there hasn't been this rapid, the good news is there has not been a rapid closure of all these outlets, but I think there have been staff reductions, and a lot of them are, you know, trying to figure out the way forward like we are.
And this is a surprise question for you, so I'm not sure if you're going to be answering this,
They're all-
but they're all surprises. Can international fact checkers come visit the United States right now?
It's very technical. I should say, I don't know if they can come work in the United States. We're getting into something bureaucratic that I don't have.
I'm not trying to get to the facts, but what I was trying to raise with Katie is we have seen some official opposition to fact checkers around the world. And some of that has included from the Trump administration attempts to bar them from coming to the US at different points. And so I won't make you get into the technicalities of where that stands, because I didn't prep on that either. But what we're seeing is that backlash to fact checking in a lot of ways. Something that should be, truth is not partisan, facts are not partisan. Why are we seeing this kind of backlash? And what are fact checking groups doing to kind of sell their mission, like PolitiFact is?
So that State Department policy that you mentioned for certain visas, for people who wanted to come and work in the US, and we speak about it broadly, it did not just target journalists who have done fact checking, although that is extremely alarming. It also fact checked like anyone in the industry. So in any industry that touched that kind of work. So it's getting into tech platform employees who touch that kind of trust and safety employees. So why are they doing that? I think they have effectively convinced a sizable amount of people that these efforts amount to censorship, even though that is in fact, it's in fact the opposite. And they are trying to limit speech, free speech and journalism by putting in place these restrictions. So why are they, I think it's a great question. Why are they fighting fact checking so much? Because it works. Because it's holding them accountable. Because it's providing the truth about what's actually going on.
Is it hard to, I know it's hard to run a fact checking organization in this climate, but to maintain and explain the nonpartisan point of it. I know that even, talking to students a lot of times, there is often a belief that if you believe that this, party or politician is not telling the truth, or you oppose their policies, whatever, that is going to opposite you support the other side. If you fact check this side, that means you must be on that side. But that's not the point of fact checking. But you find that you're constantly being told, targeted, called partisan when you're trying to find the facts?
Yeah, it's a pretty common misconception that isn't new to this administration. This has been something that has been used to attack the integrity of our work. I think there was a memorable line in the even like 2012 campaign where they were like, we're not gonna, the Romney campaign said, we're not gonna cater to fact checkers, and there's just this frustration. But I can tell you that we get just as much frustration sometimes from Democratic officials who do not feel like we're on their side because we're calling them out as well. But I think they're just like, that's just not how they interact with the media all the time, but it is theirs sometimes.
Well, I think we're in that partisan moment, right, where the response gets to be, oh, you are calling me out on this, we're on the opposite side, we're enemies, or whatever that may be.
You're left-leaning, so it doesn't matter anyway, is something that they would say. And so it doesn't, I hope the principles that I stressed is that we are consistent, we call it on both teams, and we apply the same scrutiny to both sides and the same process. So what I do is try to emphasize, be transparent about our sources and our methodology. Because I think our methodology, once you understand it, once you understand how we list all of our sources, how we do not use anonymous sources, we don't quote anonymous sources in our stories. I think that builds trust because it's different than the way a lot of the mainstream media works, right? And I'm very interested in trust building strategies, and I'm very glad that I inherited a great set of trust building strategies. And so that's the most we can do, is just be vocal about our process.
I love all of the transparency of sources at the bottom of stories. I think that we're in a moment where many people don't understand what journalism is, because we are in a partisan moment where everything is seen through this lens of teams, like we're sports teams. It's like rooting for the Huskies when you're a member of a political party, and it shouldn't be. Let's not sportsify politics any more than it already is. But we've got always understand that that is the role of journalism in general, right?
Exactly. This isn't a new sentiment. I think if there are any political journalists in the room, it doesn't matter if you're writing for PolitiFact or any outlet. If you're writing about someone that voters like or dislike, they're just going to have a reaction and assume that you're like out to get their candidate if you're writing a negative story. And for me, I'm not an editor who's like, go give me negative stories. You know, no one's like that, right?
Give me all the pants on fire in some way.
Yeah, but I think that's just why it's important to show the readers, like, we're not ganging up on one side. There's no agenda. I think that's the most, like, common word leveled against any outlet. It's like, well, you're just serving some agenda. It's like, no, actually, the truth is our agenda.
And that reaction that you just described, the way people react to your fact check, when it fact checks someone they support, an idea they support, that's the exact mechanism going on in our brains when we fall for disinformation in the first place, isn't it?
Yes, we are inclined to fall for things that really cater to what we want to believe.
Right.
And so that's what makes that screenshot of the Tiger Woods post from Trump's True Social account so, like, believable for a lot of people. Like, they assume he would say something like that, and it sounds like him, so it's probably true. I wish I had an example of, like, myself, like, getting got recently. It does happen, but I don't have one to share. But if it comes to me, I will share.
But it is totally the case that when we see something and it fits our preconceived biases, we are less likely to scrutinize it. When we see something that challenges what we already believe, we're immediately, that must be fake. Fact check that one, pants on fire, right? But when we see something that supports it, we're more likely to just go along and think yeah, of course it is. And I think that's also when all of us as social media users and students too, we press the share button, right? Because, yeah, of course Trump said this about Tiger Woods, right?
Yes. Okay, the one that sticks out to me last October that I think I did fall for where there was this nursing home, this really sweet nursing home on Halloween, where all the residents were dressing up in funny costumes. You know, they were like, on a crosswalk, and it was like a walker with a cross necklace or something. It was just like quirky things like that. And then one of our reporters said, this is AI. I was like, what do you mean? You know, like this had been shared by everyone, everyone. And if you follow the link to this account, it went to a store attached to no senior center at all. But it was just like cute. But you look into it a little bit more, you find there's a nefarious thing going on, which is someone selling merch for a senior center that does not exist.
I think that, you know, I hear a lot sometimes from students when I point out something like, this might be fake. And I'm gonna say it's not just my students, also friends, husband, etc. You know, that this might be fake. Often the response is, well, why would they do that? Why would someone do that? And I think that we get stuck thinking that it's gonna have some real answer other than make money, sell fake merch, get clicks, right? But that's the answer.
I mean, there's a variety of motivations, and it's very hard to know.
Sure.
And so I think, yes, make money, that is one. Watch the world burn is another one that people
Chaos
like to
nihilism.
do. Yeah, exactly. Build up a following, even if it doesn't generate monetization, it still adds credibility and influence, and people like followers. There's a lot of reasons, but I think if you fall for the small stuff very easily, that makes me very worried for what we would fall for with a really serious disinformation campaign. And so I bring up these examples that are lighter and not that consequential, like in the presentation and the Halloween costume, because if we're falling for that, we enrage skits online that, you know, make it look like TSA was tackling someone on a plane, and that didn't happen in that instance. But it's designed to make you feel bad. And we just have to sharpen our skills and be more alert, because I think the real ones are still coming.
I think you're right. And I do think it is that test of the, you know, the benign ones. And that's what I was thinking about when I asked, why would they do that? Because there's so much benign disinformation. Did you see the one where it was like, drunk Canadian rides a grizzly bear? Anyone? to see the drunk Canadian riding with the grizzly bear AI, because my husband definitely said, "Did you see the guy riding the bear in Canada when we were in Canada?" And I was like, "Oh, honey, no." And now we have to talk about AI. And I was talking to someone earlier, about like all the cute kitten videos and the cute puppy videos and the cute, animals who you wouldn't think would hanging out together videos. There is so much that disinformation. Is that just to break us and our entire connection to truth and like just break us and destroy us? I mean, because it does feel like it's building up, or is it, just to funnel what's going to be so much more dangerous disinformation to us? Because the fake kitten's not going to hurt us, but if we fall for the fake kitten, are we going to fall for the fake stuff about the election?
It just depends, and I think that's why it's really important when you see those kind of videos to go to the account sharing it. Oh, I know what I did recently. I almost fell for a Facebook Marketplace scam. I'm trying to outfit my house with, discount goods. There's a West Elm dresser in the picture, and I was like, I'm gonna get that. That's $200. That's such a good deal. And I started to talk to the seller, and I had to put my media literacy skills to work because this person had just joined Facebook in 2026, despite being kind of older than me. Not the kind of person who's like, oh, maybe I should create a Facebook account, and so I went to their profile. They had never sold anything before. They had nothing on the profile, and it wasn't because of privacy settings, but they had this family photo, but nothing else, no friends. I was about to get got. And I felt so ashamed and embarrassed. And so I understand when you want to call people out for being wrong, that's not a good feeling on the receiving end, right? It's embarrassing. But thank goodness I went to go look at the person sharing this stuff and decided, scam no more. I'm gonna report you instead.
No offense, Katie, but you and I are a little bit older than some of the people in this room. And when we say things like, let's not dresser. But also when we say things like, get on and see whether a reliable source shared it. When you and I talk about that, I know that we probably have a similar media diet where we're regularly reading the New York Times or Associated Press or places that we consider to be reliable. But I think that many of my students don't have that same kind of media diet, and so they don't necessarily default to thinking, well, if the New York Times did it, it must be true. Or even know when you do that cross look, how to tell whether the source is reliable or not, so why go back to the mainstream media is going to, if you've heard of this media outlet and it has a story on it, maybe it's more reliable.
I think people should realize too that there are some really great news influencers that you can follow, and I'd be curious to hear who is favored in the room. But often what they're talking about is based on mainstream media reporting, if they're actually making the phone calls or doing the legwork and kind of reporting it full out, I would be very impressed, but I think I see what a lot of the times they're choosing good sources and then telling you about it.
Yeah.
So I think you can rely or cross-check things with influencers or non-traditional, even certain partisan, point of view websites. There are good ones. There are good ones that follow good practices, have good ethics, even if they have a point of view on both sides. But there are a lot of bad ones. And so you just have to see, you have to look at the language they're using. Is it what's the word I'm looking for? Overblown, a lot of hyperbole. Is it attributed to anyone or anything, any real people that you could Google and see what their history is? So yeah, I don't need to use jargon about reliable news source. I think it's a good thing to address.
Are you fact-checking influencers?
Sure, yeah. They have a tremendous, there's an ecosystem. We fact check, we have a history of fact checking a lot of blogs that inform the influencers, that inform the people who are resharing that. Not to call anyone out, but we do fact check the influencers, yes.
I'd like to see the influencers be transparent about their sources the way that PolitiFact is, because that is something that I talk to students a lot about, because I don't think they realize that the influencer who's like really you like him, he's affable, he gives you information and you agree with him, is probably just getting up and reading the New York Times that morning. You can read the New York Times too. So we're seeing, do you see that influencers are a source of misinformation, or is that just such a broad word that it's like saying social media is truthful or not?
I think it's both. It's not one or the other. I think that they adopt a lot of misleading narratives and then they hop on it and they take it a step further. Just because they're citing a source, they're pointing to something in their video and it looks like a legit news story, it doesn't mean it's legit. So you have to look at those screenshots really carefully and see what's this outlet is referring to. Was it created with AI code 2 days ago? It's so easy to manipulate our sources of truth now. So they are both adopting and running away with narratives in very skilled ways, and then there are some that are creating it, creating situations, omitting critical context, only giving you part of the story. And they get a lot of attention and clicks and revenue from doing it, and not a lot of penalties. In fact, fewer penalties than ever for doing that kind of work.
I think it was really interesting that you're moving into health to do something, and so it's got to speak at least somewhat to how political health information has become, right? I mean, and how filled with disinformation the world of health information online has been, especially post-COVID. Is that why you're moving in that direction?
Well, part of it is we want to reach new audiences. We want to reach younger audiences. So we're dreaming this up to be very social media play, more than building a website. We're building a strong social media presence on these topics. We're trying to cover topics that are really rampant on social media platforms. So even if they're not said by President Trump or HHS Secretary Kennedy, there's still some validity to doing the journalism. That's one thing we've learned, is that it's never a bad idea to pay attention to what's trending on Instagram, even if it's not official policy, right? Because that is where people who are young are getting their news. That's where people who are our age and have kids are watching influencers to make decisions for their families. And so it's just another evolution that we need to make. And when I say we want to bring in new audiences, I think we realize that some people are tuning out politics. They don't want to read anything that feels like a political story or a political news story, because they're just done either way. And so we're trying to reach them by making it less about politics, less about they're right, they're wrong, but more about what is right. What do experts say about this topic? Trying to approach it less from an accountability lens and more, if you're curious, here's what to know kind of lens.
More of an informational, reliable information about your health.
Yeah, more inviting. I was describing it to a longtime partner and editor of PolitiFact recently, and she said, this sounds like service journalism, which is something that she's building a whole team on her newspaper to do.
Yeah.
And I said, yes, it is. There's accountability journalism, and we're doing that. We're also evolving our approach to covering this information to be more inviting.
Is this still going to be PolitiFact, fact-checking health, or is it like Health of Fact? I don't know. Is it going to be a different name?
We're keeping the facts out of it. No. It's going to have a different name. And actually, you can find this content. It has this tag called Well Informed. So it has its own standalone page right now. We haven't announced it to the world, but it is something that's happening on our website now.
I mean, as a longtime political reporter, I see healthcare as being extraordinarily political, and even the health trends we see online. Certainly, the anti-vax movement, has its start in social media disinformation and information online, and it has directly affected public policy. So even when we think, okay, this is just an influencer telling me how good beef tallow is for my skin, we're actually seeing these trends influence policy.
Yes.
So it's going from disinformation or maybe not supported health information into the policy and programs of the United States government to some extent.
You've got such a good read on it, actually. Because a few weeks ago we published a story on peptides. which are marketed to folks for your health. And, you know, I don't think we knew that in 2 or 3 weeks' time, there would be something that would be becoming part of our policy. We're glad that we kind of saw what was trending, what was coming, and promoted some helpful journalism ahead of that.
So we do have the midterm elections coming up, and as is often the case, the midterms are often a response to national politics. So we will likely see a big influence of, you know, the President, Trump, in a lot of these elections. We'll see it as being a referendum to some extent on what's happening in Congress and in the White House. How are you gearing up for the midterms? I know that there are certain states you're focusing on. Tell us about that.
So we want to be covering key races consistently. So doing like 20 or 25 fact checks from certain states from the heat of the primary through the election. And so to do that, we have to choose early on where we're going to not only like make our mark, but who can we team up with to spread the journalism that we're doing to an existing audience? Because we don't have a footprint in every state like we do in Florida. So this spring we've been talking to different TV news stations in particular. We have a strong partnership with Hearst and Hearst-owned stations. And so we're partnering with Hearst-owned TV stations in Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Ohio. And we are looking for new partners in Michigan and Georgia, and potentially some other states, but now I'm signing us up for more work than I have people to do it. But we're excited to, some of those states have not been places where we have covered races before, Massachusetts being one, but being huge. And so the partners there are interested in us covering the Senate race as well as the governor's race.
As you look forward to the midterms, or look toward the midterms, what is on your mind as far as like red flags that you expect we're going to see as far as political disinformation and social media hoaxes related to the election?
Well, I was thinking about the kind of policy talking points, the campaign talking points, and I'm very curious because whatever script you had 2 months ago, you had to rip that up and figure out, well, where is this Iran war going? You know, what are the TV ads, what are you saying about that? So I don't know on the policy side. I know the economy, affordability, gas prices, immigration, DHS, like those are all really interesting through lines, right? And that's just to name a few outside of health. But I think one thing I thought was going to happen in 2024 was that we'd be having the AI election, where we'd be getting these campaign ads or these hit pieces left and right, we wouldn't know what to make of it. And that didn't happen. And I felt like that was a reflection of the technology just not being that convincing at the time. But I'm really worried this is going to be the AI election because there were so many warning signs. And actually campaigns are already using AI in kind of jokey ways that maybe aren't believable, but are highly produced and easy to produce, adopt AI. And there's not a lot of incentive for them not to do that.
We've also seen politicians from across the political spectrum being very quick and willing to share AI videos. We certainly saw it with President Trump and his, I don't know, poop bomber, what would you call it? He was that terrible AI cartoon about the No Kings rally. We saw that come from, you know, be retweeted by the White House. Senator Chris Murphy recently retweeted an AI video that was was an AI video about what was going to happen post-AI with tech moguls. And I understand that there was something on it that may have shown it was AI, but I was really upset that Senator Murphy sent it out at all, regardless of it not being his, created one. I mean, he didn't create that AI video. But I think that people, you share the AI video because it supports your policy, you share the AI video because you think it's funny or interesting, but you're still sharing an AI video that is going to fool someone. I feel like that is not something that people are even ashamed of doing right now in the political sphere. That concerns me going into the election. I was wondering if you agreed.
I do. I mean, I'm glad you pointed out that this is happening on both sides. You know, I think Gavin Newsom is another one who's kind of like matching Trump's tactics to, in his view, expose Trump's tactics. But another example that came to mind is covering the war in Iran. And in the early days and weeks, you know, the only footage you can get is from the military or from social media, right? And the administration, the Trump administration started sending out videos, kind of hype videos about what the military was doing, interspersing legitimate clips with video game clips. And they really adopted that firmly into their messaging strategy, like this gamification, sportsification of like what's happening in the war. And you know, I think that is no surprise because it's been a tactic of the presidents the last year. They're adopting AI in these unconventional, you know, kind of trolly ways, right? I know that there's a portion of his base that loves it, and I think that, you know, with the Murphy tweet, there's this sense of like, is this just being normalized? Is it outrageous one day, but honestly, they're kind of testing the voters to see how angry they really will be, right? And so I think that the voter sentiment toward it will be key.
As disappointed as I am when I see official social media platforms share out AI and disinformation, I'm more disturbed to see the Department of Homeland Security sending out AI-altered photos officially from the federal government. What has PolitiFact been seeing as far as that kind of use of manipulation, disinformation, official, you know, from official channels? I mean, outside of just social media. But this was, for those of you who don't know, the Department of Homeland Security digitally altered a photo of a woman who was arrested for an immigration protest, darkening her skin and making her appear to be crying when she wasn't. We've also seen some manipulated videos and some completely fake generated AI photos from federal government agencies on their official PR, like in their official PR, which I think is a big warning for journalists and political science students looking for official information from the federal government. So what are we seeing in official channels, you know, as far as that goes?
Well, I think it's a good reason that every journalist has to have these digital sophisticated tools and techniques in their tool belt, because you never know what you're going to have to cover. You know, on that day it was DHS and the White House embracing that photo, and there has to be other sources of truth to know that was AI. Right? So that's really complicated and atypical. But I would also say that that department in particular has, we'll see what happens with the department going forward, right? There's new leadership, there's new spokespeople. I don't know if they will continue those tactics. But they were also kind of doing some old-fashioned misinformation that didn't require AI. So there was this other example in my head of police kind of like immigration agents tackling like a teenager outside of her home in a Chicago suburb. And the first response from DHS wasn't to like confirm or deny not to confirm or like say what was happening, but it was to deny it happened outright. To say this video clip you're seeing, oh, it actually happened in Chicago, like in the city of Chicago a couple years before, and this person had been arrested for shoplifting. And so that was their statement, and it was just not true at all. It was a video that was taken from a suburb, and you didn't have to be a detective of the internet advanced level to know, okay, that street sign doesn't look like something that's in downtown Chicago. You know, these videos have been posted on a certain date. They have nothing to do with this video that DHS was sharing. So again, easy fact check, but striking response.
Well, I'm going to ask you one more question, and I'm going to turn it over to the audience. So if our Q&A person will come up for a mic, we'll start taking questions in a second. But earlier earlier when you made your presentation, and we've circled past some really important issues like health information, the war in Iran. You said that truth is important because facts are important and lies are harmful. We're really in that world, right? I mean, the harm can be significant for some of the things you're checking every day. And it must feel like you have this broad range of things you're fact checking, from little kitten videos or whatever it is. I mean, you're not checking kitten videos, but you're checking a claim versus here's false claims that are changing directions of war or could lead to people's death in a pandemic. The weight is pretty heavy.
It is. And so in our Year of the Lies package at the end of last year, we featured a farmer who had been harmed by the lie that tariffs were going to make farmers rich and that were going to be paid for by foreign countries and rich farmers. And then what do we see? The farmer bail out because that was not happening. But this farmer had his soybeans sitting in barns, and I know this is a story playing out across the country, with nowhere to go because of the tariff policies that were sold on misleading rhetoric. There were also, we spotlighted a pediatrician who is confronted every day with, concerns about vaccines and other treatments that are very standard and recommended for children, and she's constantly getting asked about this and that, things that are shaped by misinformation. But it's also like in the midst of breaking news, I think that most of us tend to go to X when there's some terrible event, right? We want to see like what's new on this, what's new on this, what's new on this. And often what happens before anyone's been arrested, before anyone has been confirmed as harmed in a news event, you start seeing names come up. Oh, police are eyeing this person, police are eyeing this person. And these names aren't necessarily legit. And so there are people who are falsely accused or falsely labeled as dead. And then you have these follow-up stories come out days, weeks, months later of how people were traumatized by having their names and their identities dragged through the mud for absolutely no reason except the internet's insatiable hunger for more and more and more, even if it's not confirmed. And so those are the examples that really stick with me. And we can't get to them fast enough because the truth just takes more time to come out, and the internet is very impatient and irresponsible.
I think that is a really great point for us, and our conversation, we're going to everyone else with it, is that the pace of lies and the pace of our own desire for information is so much faster than we can check it to see if it's true. So we can, I'll leave you and turn it over to questions for you, but with the idea that you need to make sure when you're looking for truth, if it comes really quick, it's probably not true. If it comes right away, probably not true. Okay, so we'll turn it over to questions now. Sarah has the microphone, so do you have questions for Ms. Sanders?
Thank you both for this amazing conversation. Thank you, Katie, for coming. Thank you, Amanda, for having this hosting. I'll tell a quick story about fact checking. From the Tylenol, Secretary Kennedy came out and said, everyone shouldn't take Tylenol. Well, if you went and read any of the news stories that the outlets that were posting showing that Tylenol caused problems for children born to women who took Tylenol, the studies that they linked to talked about children who took Tylenol, not mothers who took Tylenol. So even if you look at the bottom and see the source list, it looks like legit peer-reviewed sources, you still need to go read it and make sure that they're saying what they're actually claiming they're saying. So that's another trick that a lot of these places will do. I have a two-part question. I'm wondering, I'm sure you're aware of like the backfire effect of fact checking, that sometimes fact checking false claims can just amplify the false claims. So I'm wondering, how do you guys think about that piece of it, and how do you measure success? Like, how do you know what you're doing is actually shifting the needle, and what needle are you trying to shift?
I feel like I should turn it over to the researcher to talk about the backfire effects, because what I've heard is like it's not really something to worry about as much as it's been hyped up. But I do think that we try to prioritize with our limited resources, claims that are going around unchallenged and pretty viral. So we're not trying to amplify the bottom of the barrel. And I'll be honest, when we were covering a lot of misinformation, there were times where I thought, oh, this one, I don't know if this one is gonna take off, you know? And so I would worry about a slight backfire effect there, because somebody who has a healthy news site wouldn't have seen that, wouldn't have known that was like circulating, right? So the audience of people we were correcting that for was really small. But at the end of the day, we kind of wonder, like, kind of want to err on the side of just getting it out anyway, like getting the facts out, because we know some people are sharing this as if it's real. But our bar for harm has kind of risen as our resources have shrunk. I hope that makes sense. But you mentioned like shifting a needle. I mean, that's really hard to define, and I don't know if we, even once we produce our fact checks, and again, they're actually pretty well read, we're never going to outperform the virality of that initial read with the lie. I shouldn't say never, because sometimes things are like widely condemned, but it often takes the work of more than just one outlet to expose that and for people to believe it. What I would say is we're very motivated by our readers and our donors who will respond to a certain fact check and say, thank you for doing that. And journalists in the room know, like, you don't often get a lot of like, great jobs. You tend to hear from people who didn't like your findings, didn't like your work. That's fine, people are busy. But when we hear like, yes, I have been, or we see Instagram comments where people are like, thank you, my mom was sharing that, she wouldn't listen to me, you explained how it's wrong. I think that to me is my needle. That's sometimes all I need.
I'll just briefly say the thing on the backfire effect, and that is that journalists and social media users should be concerned about amplifying something to a new audience. That is the line we should be concerned about. So if it's already widely out there, if the President of the United States is saying it, if an elected congressperson is saying, yeah, that fact check is important to do. In my research, I have seen where obscure conspiracy theories, obscure like dark web, they're like hidden, like they're not out there on the mainstream platforms, have been actively debunked by media outlets and therefore spread to new audiences. That world has changed a bit, to your point, but for me, what I would advise journalists and those using social media is don't amplify something that's not already going around, because even if it's you going, this is wrong, you have shared it to new audiences, you've given it hit, you've given it traction, because remember that the only thing the platforms are engaging with is engagement. That's the only thing that matters. So if you can be engaging it with this is angry, it's wrong, it's not true, but you've shared it, you've looked at it, you've commented. The second you do that, you've given it traction. So that's where I would be careful. And I'll turn it back over to Katie and Sarah for our next question.
Obviously, the landscape, the world, and media has changed since PolitiFact started, and we have more than ever confirmation bias, alternate facts, that kind of world. Have you changed the way you approach stories or the way you even write them, the language? I know a lot of people don't like to be told they're wrong, so I don't know if you maybe modeled the language a little bit different over the years?
That's a great question. I think when we were writing our fact checks of content that was going viral on Facebook, some of it was so outlandish, and so we have very fun writers who like to write fun leads, and it almost had the can you believe this is going around online? Don't fall for it. It was very meant for one audience, the audience that wants to know this is happening, but wouldn't have known if you hadn't told them. But they like to read our pants on fires. That's what that was written for. But what we had to think about after doing that for a while was the people who are actually clicking this link because they were sharing this or they saw it on Facebook are coming to our site and reading this story, and it could read like it's making fun of them. And that's, once we had that clip, we were like, oh no, that's not good. So we just try to be more straightforward, more direct, never want to make people feel, judged or ashamed or bad, right? We just want to let them know that this isn't true, and here's why.
And I think some of that response is still informing our reporting, especially with this new approach on cover and help. I don't like that.
My question is kind of similar to hers. I wanted to know what are other ways that you could have presented disinformation? Like Hands on Fire is a really cool way to do so, but I know that everybody takes things differently, especially as audiences evolve. What are other ways you have thought of presenting the disinformation to the audience?
Yeah, we do love Hands on Fire. But I think that turning the headline and turning the format are two strategies that we use. So instead of saying this specific statement you've seen is Hands on Fire, it's false, we might say I wish I had examples, but we might pose a question and kind of leave a curiosity out for the reader to say, yeah, I've been wondering, is this real? Let me click and find out. Maybe we don't rate it on our truth and meter system. Maybe we explain it a bit more from a higher level, so it's more of a story, an explainer. It's giving you more context. It's connecting it to other important themes in politics. A truth and meter fact check is so specific. It's a very specific moment in time where someone said something on this date, and we're gonna look into it. And that's a really helpful narrow frame for an 800-word story, right? But I think sometimes it's more impactful to write a bigger story, make it a video, not make it about the rating, which I think helped put PolitiFact on the map, but brings in new people who might be finding this on their feed and be curious.
I have a question about what you do when there are people that, even when you present them with fact checks, that they just don't accept it. I've seen clips of people, especially with the very secular, sects, the MAGA sect, where no matter what is presented to them, they have an entirely alternative set of facts. And with I wonder if you think of the 20 people working for PolitiFact this small, there's no way for you to effectively counter what anyone could do from anywhere in the world or bots could do in terms of disinformation intentionally. So I was wondering if there is any work that you guys do to target those people, or if you're instead looking more towards, I guess, what is considered the voter that can be seen or can be flipped.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's really important for me to say that we're not trying to influence people's choice. People can choose to do whatever they want with the information, right? For some people, they don't need to vote for the most technically honest candidate if they simply prefer the other candidate, right? We're just trying to promote information about what is actually true about our systems, right? And so I think I have plenty of people who correspond with me on email, and they either like our work some days or they don't like it other days, and they tell me why. And sometimes I respond and I say, well, our fact check covered those points, or I'll say that was not something we covered in the fact check. At some point you have to stop and you have to say, I hear you, but that's not, we looked into it and that's not what we found. Respectfully, I can't talk about this anymore, is how I try to kindly deal with that. And I think this is corny, but we do just need to amicably cut it off sometimes and say I get it. It's very hard to change minds, and that's why we're not in the change minds business.
I think that Brad hit on something that I've seen other debunking sites hit on, which is there is a certain portion of the population that's open to facts, and there's probably always a section that is not. And yeah, journalists, fact checkers are speaking to people who are in some kind of reality appreciation mode, I'll say. But there probably are those people that fact checks aren't gonna reach, that really believe every conspiracy theory of, Earth being flat and whatever else we can come up with.
They want to.
And they want to believe that. That's their choice too. Choice not to care about the truth. I think we might have time for one more question.
Thank you. Katie, the posting by Donald Trump that you used as an illustration that was fake,
Yes.
that raised, right after that, you both raised a very good point, which was that people say to themselves, well, why would somebody falsify this? And I looked at that post, there were many elements of it that made me ready to believe that it was from Donald Trump. And I won't go into his character or other people's political inclinations, but I could see someone bringing it to me and me saying, oh my goodness, I can't believe this, but I did believe it. Well, what would you say somebody's motivation was? We don't know who posted that, right?
I don't think we got into that in the fact check.
Well, let's say we don't. I mean,
Yeah.
what would you say, if I brought that to you, what would you say would be a reason to think that somebody construed that very authentic and convincing fake?
Probably a few motivations. So perhaps monetization, perhaps. But I think just chipping away at his image, his reputation, right? That kind of thing by itself, gestures to tweet that is not on the screen, but that kind of thing is not going to, change anyone's mind about Donald Trump, but it does kind of galvanize opposition, right? And so I think that could be part of the motivation to pump that out as soon as the Tiger Woods news hits, right? Because it sounds believable to people. But I also wouldn't be surprised if someone was like, I'm gonna make a Trump tweet. Like, I really think it's that simple sometimes.
Just having fun.
And then they're like, oh, I went viral,
I do think a lot of it's just that. It's I don't care and I can. We look for why too much, right? And people are just like, why all these? If you're on Facebook, there's so many sites that sell that the whole profiles now are like giving you little history lessons, and half of them are AI written and wrong, and they're completely benign, and they might be about someone who really is interesting historically. That doesn't mean that post is true. It's they can. One more question, and then we'll have some time for reception. I'll encourage all of you to eat cookies, eat vegetables, drink lemonade or whatever's over there before you leave.
Okay, so I'm one of those political aggregation influencers you were talking about, and I'm wondering how I can do that in a responsible way, just kind of not misinforming the public, and how many sources I should have, or if I should put them in the video, just kind of general information.
Well, good for you. Can I just throw it back to you? Like, what are you trying to build? Why do you want people to come to you?
I'm trying to build independent media platform, obviously, but trying to kind of pivot, jump people back to the left because they kind of, are kind of going far right, at least on most social media platforms.
So is your goal to highlight the reporting that you're seeing, or is it to generate your own reporting?
I've been doing documentary work down in Minneapolis and just doing stuff like that, but most of my content's aggregation articles that I read from the internet.
Well, I would say for anybody in your shoes, and thanks for introducing yourself, I think knowing reputable sources, even if they don't always agree with you, shows your audience that you're willing to hear the other side, you're aware of the critiques on the other side, and you're not just there to be a cheerleader who turns a blind eye to, nuance, right? I think it's really important for influencers to embrace that word nuance.
Should you start citing sources maybe in
I was
press
assuming
bar or something?
Yeah, I was gonna say keep citing sources,
Should always
but if
cite
you're not
sources.
citing sources, it's good.
Yeah, also have the actual links.
Put them in the comments, put them in the description of your video. That's something that we do sometimes. We don't want to make the video description super long, but you you don't have to gum up the tech script by like this 2024 CDC report that's public, you know, you can keep it concise, but do give people more to chew on.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you all very much for joining us today. Katie and I and everyone else will be around here for a little bit, so if you have more questions for Katie, I'm sure she'd be okay with you coming to introduce yourself to her. Please help yourself to the reception before you go. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us.